The desert sun beat down without mercy. It turned the sand into fire and the air into poison. Anna's lips were cracked and bleeding. Her wrists were raw where the iron shackles had rubbed her skin away. She had been left here to die, chained to a wooden post in the middle of nowhere. Her crime was simple. She had refused to lie for Bartholomew Kane, the most powerful man in 3 counties. Now she was paying the price. But Kane had made one mistake. He never expected a stranger with an axe to ride through this forgotten piece of hell. Anna tried to swallow, but her throat was too dry. She had stopped crying hours ago when her tears ran out. The chains that bound her wrists were connected by a heavy link that ran through an iron ring on the post. There was no way to break free. She had tried until her hands bled. The vultures were already circling overhead, waiting for her to stop moving. She thought about her life before this moment. She had been a schoolteacher in the town of Coyote Ridge. She taught children their letters and numbers in a small wooden schoolhouse. It was a simple life, but it was hers. Then she had seen something she was not meant to see. Late one evening, she had been walking home from the schoolhouse when she heard shouting from the bank. Through the window, she saw Bartholomew Kane shoot the bank manager in cold blood. Kane saw her too. The next morning, Kane visited her at the schoolhouse. He was a big man with cold eyes and expensive clothes. He owned most of the land around Coyote Ridge and half the businesses in town. He told her she would swear in court that she saw a drifter kill the bank manager. She refused. She would not send an innocent man to hang for Kane's crime. That was when Kane's men grabbed her. They brought her out here 5 miles from the nearest water, 10 miles from the nearest town. They hammered the post deep into the ground and locked the shackles around her wrists. Kane himself had stood over her, his shadow blocking the sun for a moment. He told her she had made her choice. Now she would live with it, though not for long. Then they rode away, leaving her alone with the desert and the sun. The sound of hoofbeats made Anna lift her head. At first, she thought she was dreaming. The heat could play tricks on a person's mind. But the sound grew louder. A rider was coming through the valley. He was moving slow, picking his way through the rocks and cacti. Anna tried to call out, but only a weak croak came from her throat. The rider was a man, tall and lean, with a week's worth of beard and clothes that had seen better days. He rode a brown mare that looked as tired as he did. Saddlebags hung heavy on both sides, and tools were strapped to his pack. An axe handle stuck up behind his saddle. He looked like a prospector, or maybe a trapper heading back from the mountains. When he saw Anna, he stopped his horse and stared. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he swung down from his saddle and walked toward her, his boots crunching on the sand. Up close, she could see his eyes were gray like storm clouds. Deep lines marked his face from years of squinting in the sun. He knelt beside her and examined the shackles. His rough fingers were gentle as they checked her wrists. He stood and went to his horse, pulling the axe from its place. The blade caught the sunlight as he raised it high. Anna flinched, not knowing what he meant to do. Then he brought it down hard on the chain between her shackles. The first blow sent sparks flying. The second cracked the metal. On the third swing, the chain shattered. Anna's arms fell free, though the iron band still circled her wrists. She tried to stand but collapsed. The stranger caught her before she hit the ground. He carried her to his horse and set her down in the shade of a large rock. From his saddlebed, he pulled a water skin and held it to her lips. The water was warm and tasted of leather, but it was the best thing Anna had ever drunk. His name was Caleb. He told her this after she could speak again. He was indeed a prospector, working claims in the mountains and selling what he found in towns along his route. He had no family, no home except the trails in his cabin up north. He was not a man of many words. When Anna told him about Kane and what she had seen, Caleb just nodded and helped her onto his horse. They rode through the afternoon heat with Anna holding tight to Caleb's waist. She was weak, and every movement hurt, but she was alive. They stopped at a creek as the sun began to set. Caleb filled his water skins and let his horse drink. He found some dried meat in his pack and gave it to Anna. It was tough as leather, but she ate it slowly, letting her stomach remember what food was. That night they camped under the stars. Caleb built a small fire and sat across from Anna, cleaning his rifle. She watched him work, noting how his hands moved with practiced ease. He was not a young man, maybe 40 years old, with silver starting to show in his dark hair. There was something solid about him, like a mountain that had weathered many storms. Anna asked him why he had helped her. Most men would have ridden on, not wanting the trouble. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he said that he had once left someone behind when he should have helped. He had regretted it every day since. When he saw Anna chained in the desert, he knew he could not make the same mistake twice. They traveled for 2 days, moving north toward Caleb's cabin. Anna grew stronger with food and water, though her wrists were still raw and painful. Caleb had tried to remove the shackles completely, but needed better tools. He said he had what they needed at his cabin. Along the way, he showed her how to find water in dry places and which plants could be eaten. He was teaching her to survive. On the second night, Caleb suddenly stood and listened to the darkness. He heard something Anna did not. He kicked dirt over their fire and pulled Anna behind some rocks. Minutes later, riders passed close by. Anna recognized the voices. They were Cain's men, searching for her. They were checking every trail and water hole. Cain had discovered she was gone. The next morning, they reached Caleb's cabin. It was a simple structure built against a cliff face, with thick log walls and a heavy door. Inside was one room, with a fireplace, a narrow bed, and shelves lined with supplies. Tools hung from pegs on the walls. It was clear that Caleb lived alone and liked it that way. Using his tools, Caleb carefully cut through the shackles on Anna's wrists. The iron fell away, and for the first time in days, her hands were completely free. Caleb treated her wounds with a salve that smelled of pine sap. His touch was careful, almost tender. Anna found herself trusting this quiet stranger more than she had trusted anyone in a long time. They stayed at the cabin for 3 days while Anna recovered. Caleb went about his usual work, checking his traps and working on equipment. Anna helped where she could, cooking simple meals and mending torn clothes. They fell into an easy rhythm, 2 people sharing space without need for constant talk. Sometimes Anna caught Caleb looking at her with an expression she could not read. On the 4th morning, everything changed. Caleb had gone to check his traps when Anna heard horses approaching. She looked out the window and saw Cain himself, along with 6 armed men. They had found the cabin. Anna's heart raced as she grabbed Caleb's rifle from its place on the wall. She knew how to shoot. Her father had taught her years ago. Cain dismounted and walked toward the cabin. He called out to Anna, saying he knew she was inside. He offered her a deal. Come out now, and he would make her death quick. Make him come in after her, and she would suffer. Anna said nothing. She checked that the rifle was loaded and waited. The door exploded inward as one of Cain's men kicked it open. Anna fired, and the man fell backward. The others scrambled for cover. Cain shouted orders, telling his men to surround the cabin. Anna knew she could not hold them off for long. She had only a few bullets left. Then she heard more gunfire from outside. Caleb had returned. He was behind the rocks near the cliff, shooting at Cain's men with his pistol. 2 men turned to face him, giving Anna clear shots. She fired twice more, and both men went down. Now it was Cain and 3 men against Anna and Caleb. The fight was fierce but short. Caleb moved like a ghost among the rocks, appearing just long enough to fire before vanishing again. Anna held the cabin door, making every shot count. One by one, Cain's men fell, until only Cain himself remained. He stood in the open, his gun drawn, looking between the cabin and the rocks. Anna stepped out of the cabin, the rifle steady in her hands. She told Cain to drop his weapon. For a moment she thought he would try to shoot. Then they heard more horses coming. A group of riders appeared on the trail. At their head was a man with a marshal star on his chest. Someone in Coyote Ridge had finally sent for the law. The marshal's name was Tom Brennan. He had ridden hard from the county seat after getting word about the bank manager's murder and Anna's disappearance. Several townspeople had come forward with information once they heard Anna was missing. They had been too scared of Cain to speak before, but her bravery had given them courage. Anna told Marshal Brennan everything she had seen that night at the bank. She showed him her scarred wrists and described how Cain had left her to die in the desert. The marshal listened carefully, then placed Cain under arrest for murder and attempted murder. Cain protested, claiming Anna was lying, but the marshal had heard enough stories from others to know the truth. As the marshal's men led Cain away in chains, Anna felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She was finally free, truly free. She turned to thank Caleb, but he was already walking back toward his cabin. She followed him and found him packing his saddlebags. He said his work here was done, and it was time for him to move on. Anna asked him to stay, at least for a while. She said she owed him her life and wanted to repay him somehow. Caleb shook his head. He said she owed him nothing. Helping her had helped him, too. It had given him a chance to make peace with his past. But Anna saw something in his eyes that made her think he was not being completely honest. She made a decision. She told Caleb that she was not going back to Coyote Ridge. There was nothing for her there now. Everyone would know her as the woman who stood up to Cain, and that would follow her everywhere. She wanted to start fresh somewhere new. She asked if she could travel with him for a while, just until she found a new place to settle. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. Then, for the first time since she had met him, he smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, but it changed his whole face. He said she could come if she could keep up. He warned her that life on the trail was hard. There would be cold nights and hungry days. Anna said she had survived the desert and Cain. She could handle whatever came next. They left the cabin the next morning, riding north toward the mountains. Anna wore clothes that Caleb had found for her, practical things suited for travel. Her wrists still bore scars from the shackles, but they were healing. As they rode, Caleb pointed out landmarks and told her stories of the places they passed. Anna listened and learned, feeling stronger with each mile. 3 months later, they stopped in a small town called Pine Creek. It had a schoolhouse that needed a teacher. Anna applied for the position and got it. Caleb helped her find a small house to rent and made sure she had everything she needed. When it came time for him to leave, Anna asked him to stay. This time, she did not accept his refusal. She told him that they worked well together. She said that in all her life, she had never felt as safe as she did with him. She knew he was a man who liked his solitude, but maybe it was time for that to change. Caleb listened to her words, then looked out at the mountains he loved so much. Finally, he nodded. He would stay, at least through the winter. Winter turned to spring, and spring to summer. Caleb found work at the local blacksmith shop, putting his skill with tools to good use. He and Anna spent their evenings together, sharing simple meals and quiet conversation. The town accepted them as they were, two people who had found each other through hardship and chose to face the future together. 1 year after the day Caleb had broken her chains with his axe, Anna stood in the schoolhouse teaching her students. Her wrists bore only faint marks now, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Through the window she could see Caleb working at the smithy, the ring of his hammer on iron keeping steady time. That evening, as they sat on the porch of the house they now shared, Anna thought about the journey that had brought them here. She had been left for dead in the desert, abandoned and alone. But from that terrible moment had come something unexpected. She had found strength she did not know she had. She had found justice for the wrongs done to her. And she had found Caleb, a man who asked for nothing, but gave everything. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Caleb reached over and took Anna's hand, his fingers gentle on the scars that would always remind them of how they met. Neither of them spoke. They did not need to. They had both been broken in their own ways, but together they had built something new and strong. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Anna knew that her story was not one of tragedy, but of triumph. She had faced the worst that men like Cain could do, and survived. She had found kindness in the most unexpected place, and love in the most unlikely person. The desert had tried to claim her, but she had claimed a new life instead. If this story of survival and justice moved you, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more tales from the Old West. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.